USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Year after year since its formation, the NCHC has been probably the premier league in Division I college hockey.
And joining us now on USCHO Spotlight, the commissioner of the NCHC, that's Josh Fenton. Josh, before we jump into anything, congratulations. You're going to be moving on to a new job at the end of this season, but you're sticking around till the end of the Frozen Four. We're glad to be able to talk to you, but congratulations on the new opportunity.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. It's an opportunity that brings a tremendous amount of opportunity with it. A little bit bittersweet. We'll be disappointed to leave college hockey on a day-to-day basis, but know that I'll always be connected in some way or another.
Well, let's just start with the current NCHC. And I look at it, 5 teams in the top 11 of both the pairwise and the poll. That's out of an 8-team conference. That is pretty remarkable. And I know that it has always been the mission of this conference to be the best. And I think that unequivocally, I think there's other conferences that love to put the claim out, we're the best. But statistics speak for themselves. And when you have 5 of the top 11 teams in the country, I think that, you can kind of define yourself as the best. How proud are you of the accomplishments of these 5 teams and really the whole conference as a whole?
Yeah, we're very proud of our institutions. The 21-22 year has brought another great year of success for our institutions on the ice. As you guys know, that pairwise is measured in a statistical manner, and really it's a reflection on what our teams are doing outside of our conference. And so we continue to win at a winning percentage well over 600 this past year in out of conference games, and I think that is really positioning our teams. At least the 5 of the 8, as you mentioned, for a legitimate chance to make the NCAA tournament. The polls are the polls. We understand that there's a voting aspect to that, but I think the perception of the conference is in the minds of the voters when they do vote and know that the NCHC has been strong for many years and seemingly continues to be the case this year. We've got a little bit of ways to go here, finishing up the regular season and our conference tournament, but we're certainly hopeful that we can position 5 teams into that national tournament. On average, our number's been right around 4. One year we actually had 6, which was pretty incredible. But the number's been right around 4 on average.
When I look at the conference, I look at each and every team and their out of conference schedule. You mentioned the success that you've had out of conference, but I feel like every team works hard to put together a very competitive non-conference schedule. Is that something that the conference as a whole has talked about, an approach to how you schedule opponents outside of your own conference?
So the conference doesn't get into the business of telling teams who to play from a non-conference standpoint. We never really have. We never probably ever will. Having said that, Jim, they're very in tune to the statistical measure or the statistical ranking that then ultimately selects teams into the tournament. And they know that, playing games against teams that they feel like they have a good chance to win is how they construct their non-conference schedules. And obviously the higher quality opponents, so to speak, that you're playing and assuming you're winning those games. And our history would say that we're winning those at well over 600% or 600 on a winning percentage standpoint. It will position you much higher in the pairwise at the end of the year. And so we don't directly talk about it. We do have some discussion at our annual meetings just to kind of introspectively go back and look at it. But then we allow our member schools to manage the non-conference schedule.
Josh, from the time you came to the conference, which was very early on, the conference has been kind of a catalyst, I think, for all the other conferences to step up their game, whether it's video or social media or on-ice presentation or a number of different ways. Do you think that the NCHC has been a leader in that way to help elevate the whole sport?
Well, Ed, it's very kind of you to say that. And I suppose maybe we hope so. We've got a care and concern for college hockey overall. When we set out with the NCHC many years ago and have continued over the past 9 years with what we were doing just with kind of our external operations area, it was focused around us. We weren't necessarily too concerned about what other people were doing. I really see conferences, and this is not unique to hockey conferences, but I really see conference as beyond the normal necessary mechanics, officiating, scheduling, interpretation of rules, tournaments, et cetera, being a content creation, a content distribution platform. And so we're in the business, I think, of having to tell stories, in particular of our student athletes, programs collectively, and their successes. And so we've taken that approach to try to engage fans at a level maybe that they weren't engaged at with prior conference affiliations, to then build affinity to the conference brand. And I think that that's played out, in the manner that we hoped it would. Early on, the NCHC was new. People knew of the WCHA, people knew of the CCHA, but they didn't know of the NCHC. So we had to try to kind of tell a story of this is who we are, this is why we are who we are. We did that early on, and then we've just continued to try to do things from a content creation distribution standpoint to engage fans and further build affinity to the conference. And I think that that's played out over time.
Was some of that storytelling maybe helping people recover their attitudes after seeing some of their beloved conferences go away and feel maybe a little upset about the jumbling of the whole landscape?
Yeah, no doubt. If I thought back to 9-ish years ago, when we were just starting out, there was some angst there. Michael Wiseman, our associate commissioner for kind of on the external side, he and I would reflect upon maybe some negative tweets that we would get about, who are you guys? You're not the WCHA, you're not the CCHA. And so we had to really win over the fans in terms of how we operated, how we engaged with them, because we knew that they were coming from, for the most part, I think experiences that they appreciated and enjoyed, and obviously were forced and thrown into a new situation that they knew very little about.
Another area where you have been pushing for a rule change that finally got accepted, and we talked about this over the years, is the 3-on-3 overtime in the shootout. It finally got accepted as a rule. It's been implemented. As far as on the ice, it seems like it's going very well. Maybe still some discussion about how it should be weighted in the pairwise and how overtime wins should be counted. But overall, looking at that and finally getting it through and seeing it implemented, how do you feel that's worked out?
Yeah, let me first start with, kind of the why. The why went back to experience for players and then experiences for fans. In the 5-on-5 model, obviously only for 5 minutes in the regular season, we were seeing games decided in overtime at a rate of about 30%, maybe a little bit more than that. Obviously, professional leagues and frankly, all other elite hockey entities, I would say across the world, had kind of started to matriculate to a decreased on ice strength. I think maybe originally 4-on-4, and then obviously adjusted to 3-on-3. Opened up the ice surface more action, more results. And so when you eventually got to 3-on-3, you were seeing games decided at a rate of 60% or higher. And so the first thing was fan experience and student athlete experience. And so I think we accomplished that. The second thing is what I just said, is that everybody across seemingly the world had moved to this model of overtime. And so I think we all felt that college hockey should probably follow suit. And, we as a conference had implemented it just within conference play many years ago at this point. And we're glad that the country has come to this place. Now, you reference, we've got a unique aspect to our model where we've got the statistical ranking, the pairwise that determines the teams that are going to get into the national tournament. And how do you factor in the results of regulation and then ultimately overtime into that aspect? And so we saw something come out of the championships committee 2 years ago now, I guess, and really wasn't in play last year because of COVID, where we have this very diminished weighting wins in overtime versus losses in overtime, 55-45. So we're essentially very, very close to a tie. I think that was a give for those that said, hey, we shouldn't wait 3-on-3 overtime overly significant in something that determines who gets into the tournament and who doesn't get into the tournament. I would agree with that. This is the first year that we've actually had a chance to really look at those results and how do they factor in. I still think it's too early to tell. I think we have to go through the entire season, and I think the committee has to explain to us, okay, here are the results, and here's how overtime kind of factored into those results, and maybe how teams moved or teams didn't move. They can go back and look at, well, what if we just programmed all those games in as ties as opposed to the results of 55-45? I think we'll ask them to go back and do that, and they'll be able to show us where their difference is. My simple opinion is I don't think we're going to really see much difference because the weighting isn't overly significant. But I understand that it's a point of discussion and in some cases contention amongst coaches. The other aspect, Ed, that I would mention that we still haven't maybe quite solved is how does an overtime result kind of factor into the win-loss aspect of a record? And then I'll go back to the pairwise and say there's also an aspect to head-to-head and common opponents, which is two other things that I take into account within the pairwise, where results in overtime are counting as wins and losses as it relates to head-to-head and common opponents. So there's some consternation amongst that, which I get and understand. And I think the game is going to have to discuss that and figure that out as we go forward into next season.
More with NCHC Commissioner Josh Fenton in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
We're back with NCHC Commissioner Josh Fenton. Over the years, it seems, looking from the outside, that you and the other 5 Division I commissioners have had a really good working relationship. Is that the case, and how's that been to work with the other leagues?
You asked me that question, and that probably brings up some emotion of things that I'm going to miss the most. I go back to when I first got into this, and Joe Bertagna had been around for forever, and that isn't meant to say that he's old, but he'd been around forever. Bobby D at Atlantic Hockey, Steve Hagwell, the ECAC, obviously us in the Big Ten, we're kind of new. And then, to be honest with you, I got a chance to work with Bruce McLeod for a little bit there. I think in his last year, I believe it was, of the WCHA. And so, just really, really special relationships. And your question is about the working relationship. I think the working relationship is excellent. And I think, it was that way when we had some people that are no longer with us. And it's that way now with some of the new people. Don Lucia, obviously former coach at Minnesota. And I knew Don from a coaching standpoint. Now I've gotten to know him from an administrative standpoint. Steve Metcalf at Hockey East, he and I were friends before he got into that role when he was with UNH and just kind of crossing paths through college hockey. So it's a small world. I think what you can say about that group is that we all have a belief that we need to do what's best and right for college hockey overall. Yes, we get paid and we answer to people within our conferences. But it's a very sincere and true kind of look at what can we do to ensure that the sport is growing and healthy overall into the future.
That leads me into my next question. Are there some things that if you say you were the overarching commissioner or were able to direct all of college hockey or were able to push some things along, are there some things that need to happen that you would like to see happen?
That's a big question. I think there's always improvement that we can be made. I know our rule book, a plain rule book, probably needs some some look at, and can we adjust rules to better help officials in games and ultimately help game flow. Obviously, video review has become a large part of the sport, and at sometimes to our detriment. But frankly, you guys, we've set up the rules in the manner in which video review will be used more often than not, because the rules allow for video review to be used more often than not. And so I think there's something about that probably has to be discussed and looked at as we kind of move forward into the future, because I do worry a little bit about the length of games at time when we have multiple reviews in a contest. And so I think it would be worthwhile exercise to look at that. Conference alignment, I think, and maybe not so much in the East, but maybe in the East. I don't know that obviously as well as I know the West. Are we aligned in a manner that's serving the best interest of, first and foremost, the student athletes from a health and safety standpoint, the wear and tear on their bodies as we go through travel and whatnot, plus the experiences that we want to provide them with environments that are electric and vibrant, and putting them into games that are meaningful and rivalries, but then also from a fan experience standpoint. Are we serving the fans in the best interest just based upon what our alignments are right now? I think COVID has probably had us kind of go back and look at that a little bit closer. And I'm not suggesting that anything is coming anytime in the future, so don't read into that. But I do believe that there's something that has to be discussed just regarding conference alignments and whether geography becomes more of an aspect to it into the future.
And also perhaps size of conferences and places for all these independents and new programs to play.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we have institutions that are seemingly popping up occasionally and saying that, hey, we'd like to start men's or women's hockey, and we need to have a place for them. We need to have a conference structure and a landscape that makes sense, that allows institutions to say, hey, we do want to start a program because there is a home for us. And I don't know that we've done a good enough job of that. And I kind of say we, meaning collectively as a sport, in our alignments to welcome, the institutions and new programs that do want to start out. So there's no doubt we have to think through that.
Josh, when you look back at almost a decade with the NCHC, what do you take away? What did you learn about yourself, maybe professionally, or just about college hockey that, you can take away and say, I'm glad I experienced that because I learned from it?
Yeah, good question. I think the biggest thing that I probably learned, and then I'll say just one thing about just what's most important to me, is the ability to manage across kind of a wide range of different perspectives and viewpoints. And when you work in conference offices, you don't answer to necessarily one boss, or you don't lead on behalf of one particular organization, company, institution. You lead on behalf of the collective membership of your conference. And for us, that's 8 member institutions. And so the ability to build consensus, communicate, collaborate across 8 different institutions. And it's not just the institution itself. And you guys know that it's the president and the chancellors, it's the athletics directors, it's the head coaches, it's the equipment managers, the trainers. There's lists of groups that you have to manage, faculty athletic reps that you have to manage across. That isn't always the easiest, because they sit on a campus where their interests are most important to them. But to be able to pull them together and say, this is what's most important to the conference, and then indirectly or maybe directly, what will ultimately benefit you individually as an institution, that's not always the easiest thing to do. And so, I think I've had to learn to be patient and to communicate, probably over communicate and collaborate with people across, kind of a wide swath and a lot of different diverse perspectives. The other thing, Jim, I'll say is that, what's most important to me are the relationships with the people across our membership, first and foremost. But then I spoke a little bit earlier about the relationships just in the game, relationships with people like the two of you. And, those are some of the things that I know will be there in the future, but I do believe is what makes the game of hockey, and maybe specifically college hockey, so special, is that, we do compete against each other. We do want to beat each other, but at the end of the day, I think we can come together and work together for the best interests of the sport. And those relationships are something that I will hold near and dear to my heart, really, really forever.
Josh, one last question. You're heading to the Summit League, a conference that has a very strong mid-major conference out there, I think, in college athletics. That's safe to say. But it does not have a hockey component to it. There is a lot of hockey feel to some of the membership in there. Would there be a desire for you to maybe get hockey going in the Summit League someday?
I don't know, Jim. I mean, it's certainly way too early to tell on something like that. That really isn't a focus of ours, a priority of mine right now. As I kind of make this transition, we will be talking about and have been talking about membership in the Summit League. And I suppose once you talk about membership in the Summit League, then there will be natural discussions about sport offerings. Hockey may be a part of that discussion. It may not be a part of that discussion. There'll probably be discussions with other sports. So, I suppose remains to be seen. I think I'll say one thing related to that, that we have to keep our eye on, that college hockey has to keep its eye on as well, is that the NCAA is going through quite a bit of transformation right now. We have a new constitution in place. The constitution is very non-controversial. If you read it, it kind of says what you think it should say as it relates to what the NCAA should do. But now we have what's called a transformation committee that's looking at really the Division I rules and essentially reimagining what it means and what it looks like to be in Division I. And I do think that there will be some impact across obviously all of college sports, but I think there could be some impact across a sport like hockey. I do believe the NCAA in some manner will be deregulated to some extent. I think there'll be more push down to conferences and institutions. And so the point to that is, does that mean a single sport conference will have the capacity and the bandwidth to be able to do what they do, similar to how we've done that for the past however many years now? Or is it going to be more challenging for a single sport conference? And we may need to look at, are there strategic relationships, alignments, with multi-sport conferences, those types of things. I think the more that hockey, a sport like hockey, because there's others similarly, that can have a seat at the NCAA table, because I can tell you, I've been in enough conversations right now that, when we talk about college athletics overall, the sports that are a part of multi-sport conferences get most of the airtime, and understandably so for other reasons. But I do think that there could be a benefit for hockey in the future to be more situated within the overall kind of structure of the NCAA. But we're having to kind of wait and see here what's going to come of the new look of the NCAA. And it has a lot of people nervous. And it'll be some time before we understand where everything's going.
Well, I think we could do a whole 30-minute podcast just on that one topic alone. And I think we'll save that until Boston and the Frozen Four, when we get hopefully one more conversation with you as the NCHC commissioner. But Josh Fenton, everything you've done for college hockey the last decade or so, we've appreciated. We love getting to chat with you every now and again. It's really special. So thanks for your time today, and good luck the rest of the way. There's a lot of good, exciting hockey left to be played.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate what you guys do for college hockey. I look forward to seeing both of you in Boston.
That's NCHC Commissioner Josh Fenton. Jim, over the years, it's been great to get to know Josh Fenton, and the impact of the NCHC and his leadership really can't be underestimated. I think it was correct when I asked him about, have you as a league, has what you've done really elevated all of college hockey?
Yeah, I was very interested to hear kind of his philosophical approach to the job too. That it's not just about running tournaments and assigning officials and making schedules and stuff like that. It really is about content creation. And we as a society have seen that change over the last 10 years even. And that's really almost the lifetime of the NCHC. That, I worked in public relations for 15 years, and you didn't create a lot of your own content back then. That has become almost the mantra of every business organization out there. So to see that he was able to take that and apply it to college hockey, college athletics is really groundbreaking. And I think that it did force a lot of other conferences to kind of copy the roadmap. And I think that when you look at what Josh Fenton and the NCHC have accomplished, a lot of what you're seeing in the other 5 conferences these days really had their start in the NCHC. That's something you had to take a lot of pride in if you're any of the 8 member institutions in the NCHC.
Well, certainly the landscape of college hockey has changed quite a bit since Josh took that position early on in the formation of the NCHC. And not everybody thinks it's for the better, but by and large, it is for the better. There's much more prominence. The skill level is better. Arenas have improved. Content, as you just mentioned. The game in general has benefited over the last few years, certainly by his leadership in that conference and his work and the work of the other commissioners around college hockey.
I think you're right, 100%. And I think we've seen college hockey grow. And would that have happened if the WCHA remained the old WCHA and the CCHA remained the old CCHA and we never had a Big Ten and we never had an NCHC? I don't know. But I like to think that what we created with those 2 new conferences was for the better of college hockey. And I know there are fans that still will sit there and say, no, it's not fair because Minnesota and North Dakota don't play in league play 4 times a year. But you know what? Sometimes you have to embrace change. And I think that in terms of, as you put it, I think that the success of a lot of programs in both the Big Ten and the NCHC have made other institutions in college hockey step their game up, whether it's, improving your arena. That has been probably the biggest thing that we've seen in 10 years. There's nobody that has a horrible arena anymore. There's very few that look like they play in youth hockey barns. I can tell you that. And I think we go back 10 years, there were a lot of youth hockey barns out there. And I'm not knocking on youth hockey barns, but there were a lot of bad arenas that were not state of the art and could not, be used to attract recruits. That's difficult. So I think that the ability to change that, just that one aspect in college sports and college hockey has been a big success. And I think you have to look at both the Big Ten and the NCHC as reasons behind that. And
Josh Fenton leaves the NCHC at a time where there's probably going to be another sea change in college hockey. He mentioned the new constitution for the NCAA, and we kind of touched on a little bit about realignment and rearrangement. And there's a lot of discussion going on right now about realigning, not just along geography, as Josh mentioned, but also in areas of academic affinity and things like that. There's going to be a lot more change coming in college hockey. We've seen that change can be good, and hopefully we see some good changes coming forward.
Yeah, I really thought it was interesting to hear him say that he thinks that you will see more individual conference sports like college hockey for 5 of the 6 conferences try to align with full-on conferences, full multi-sport conferences. The Big Ten's already there. I kind of had that leading question about the Summit League. You look at the Summit League's members, I think there's 5 that play college hockey right now, Division I level. So that's part of it, and would that potentially realign many conferences? I think that there has been talk. I remember a couple of years ago writing a story that, Hockey East was thinking, at least from a business perspective, of trying to align with America East, which a lot of its members are in that conference. So I think that he has some foresight there. I do think you'll see some conferences try to align with multi-sport conferences just to have that seat at the table, just to have that power. I think that we love college hockey because of the fact that it's usually some individual conferences and you don't feel like you have big multi-sport tasks over your head. But I do think that we're going to see benefits that will far outweigh the ability to stay independent over the next, 5-10 years.
And throw in transfers and name, image, and likeness, it is a volatile time in college sports and college hockey, too. We hope to pick up the conversation more with Josh Fenton and other commissioners at the Frozen Four in Boston. But for now, we'll wrap it there. This podcast has been brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.